I know what you're doing.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Christine Lightsey. I'm so awesome. I'm so awesome. I'm so Okay, I'm so excited to welcome Deb with us tonight. We have been working together for a couple weeks now, trying to make this all happen. So we're so excited to have her here. I'm actually not going to give your bio like I normally do because I feel like she's going to tell her story, and I don't want to ruin it for you. But we are going to go. She's going to speak. We'll have some questions and answers. And then we're going to have a planetarium show at 8 p.m. around there in the planetarium. We're going to check and see if it's clear enough to do the observatory in between. We saw some clouds, so we're going to go check. And the New Hampshire Astronomical Society is hopefully going to be outside. We're going to turn some lights off in the parking lot so you can see a lot of stars, hopefully. But if you need anything, we'll be floating around, and we're going to get started. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. I'm Debbora Losch, as she just said, as awesome Christina told you. I'm going to start by saying I'm very nervous, just so you know. I feel like I'm going to put that out there so when I mess up, we know who to blame it on. So today I'm going to be telling you about my story. Now, it's primarily the focus is through aviation, but we're going to be talking about my story about how I got into aviation. The barriers I had to face getting into aviation, not just by being a woman, but being from a low-income family. We're going to talk about my time in the military as a woman and the struggles I faced there, all the way up into where I am now and why I do what I do and what I do. I do like to give one warning to all the parents. At some point, we will have discussed sexual assault. However, it's not graphic, and I will give you a warning beforehand. Okay? All right. So I guess the best place to start is with Little Debbie. Like me. That was not intentional. Little Debbie, check that out. So this is me. I'm pretty young. As a parent, you'd think I'd be able to guess how old I was, but I'm going to go with like 5, maybe 4. Who knows? And around that age, I had my very first encounter with aviation. I went to Kennedy Space Center with my family. And while we were at Kennedy Space Center, I forgot to start my timer, y'all. I'm going to talk all night. While I was at Kennedy Space Center, we had this event. Has anybody here ever been to Kennedy Space Center?
Yes.
So when you go, they have this thing called Meet the Astronaut. It's basically seating kind of like this, and you sit down and you wait to see what astronaut's going to get up and talk. So we had no idea who was going to be there. And we sat down in the middle, and I was right about here. So there was a seat open next to me, and a gentleman sits down, and he starts talking to me. My grandpa sitting next to me looks at me because I look at him like stranger danger, right? And he says, "You're fine." But he's got a weird look on his face. But, you know, I was a little kid, made no difference to me. So I'm chatting away with this guy. He's telling me all about astronauts. He's talking about, you know, what it's like, you know, what astronauts go through, the grueling training and everything. And as a kid, I'm like, whoa, that sounds fun. The G-force training, so much fun. And then he says, "All right, well, I've got to go," which I thought was weird. Why is he leaving? We're just getting started. And I look over at my grandpa, and he's just white. And he's like, do you know who that was? Well, I didn't. And as he got up on stage, he said, "Hello, everybody, I'm Buzz Aldrin." So looking back, it makes a lot more sense now. But I just, after hearing him that day and having talked to him, I just knew I wanted to be an astronaut, like all kids my age. But I really did. And my mom took it very seriously. I'm talking, we went to Kennedy Space Center all the time. We booked watching the shuttles take off. It was a huge thing. Unfortunately, by the time I reached the age where I could start doing the astronaut summer camps with NASA at 7, my father got cancer, and it was really fast and very brutal, and he died very quickly. And the worst part was my mom had 4 kids, and we lived in Tampa, Florida, which is not cheap. And now the person who was the breadwinner of the house was gone. And we didn't have any family there except my grandparents, who were both pensioners. You know, they didn't have a big income. So we didn't have a lot. we moved. We lived in a very small 1-bedroom apartment. I had to wear the same clothes every year for years until I physically couldn't fit them anymore and had to go to Goodwill as my back to school shopping, which for me, I was excited for. I didn't see anything different. I didn't understand that you probably shouldn't be eating ramen and peanut butter with sugar sandwiches every day. But that's what it was. By the way, if I sound like I'm crying, I'm just getting more nervous the more I talk. So I didn't realize how bad it was until I really started getting into like 4th and 5th grade, and I was getting bullied because I was the poor stinky kid. Again, I wore all the same clothes. They get damaged a lot. I wore the same shirt for a week once, and I didn't notice that was bad. And it was I remember vividly, it was a sunflower that when you stepped outside, it changed color. To me, it was the coolest shirt in the world, but to everybody else at school, I was still a baby for wearing that shirt. And why did I wear it so much? Why did I stink so bad? And so it was hard. As far as aviation goes, I wanted to do all these camps. I wanted to join these programs. I wanted to be in aviation. I wanted to be that astronaut. But alas, my mom and her full-time job made just enough, because the government said so, to not qualify for financial aid, which was ridiculous because she didn't make enough to pay rent, pay for daycare, pay for 4 kids, pay for food, pay for housing. This wasn't something she could realistically afford. And then on top of that, we're supposed to have extra money to go to summer camp and to join programs like Civil Air Patrol that cost $5 a month. I couldn't afford that. So all those programs, every time I got my hopes up, waiting for that application to return, and every time I got turned down. So I never made it. Finally, my mom was able to save the $3,000 it cost to go to the NASA summer camp, and they were full for 2 years, fully booked. So I never got the chance. And at that point, I realized I'm not going to make it in aviation. It's too expensive. I was starting to get a little bit older, and I realized how expensive aviation is. Getting a license, college, that's not something I'd ever do. I was going to work at 7-Eleven like everybody else in my neighborhood, in the projects, and that was that. So I stopped caring. I stopped showing up to school. I skipped a lot. I dabbled in drugs quite a bit from the age of 11. And I'm going to show you what changed everything. When did I snap out of it? I tell you, I know exactly when. It was 10th grade. So that's me right before. As you can see, I looked pretty healthy, but I was very under the influence when my mom took this cute photo she posted on Facebook and said, "Look, my little animal." But really, I was depressed. I was secretly harming myself, and I wasn't doing anything worth doing. But then this is where things changed, 10th grade. I was at the poorest high school in all of Tampa, Florida. And I don't know what happened, but there was this grumpy old retiree from the Air Force, B-2 bomber. And he was like, "These kids need to do something." And he said, "Well, you know what? They're going to build a plane." And so he purchased himself an RV-9 aircraft, which is a kit aircraft. It comes in boxes and you build it yourself, essentially. And he said, "Well, I'm going to put this in our curriculum and I'm going to create an aviation class." And we got them to approve it, and he did. He created the MacDill Aeronautical Academy. Best part, it's free. And if you're a student at the school, you can get in. Now, by the time I learned of this, because remember, I was never at school, I talked to him and he said, "You really want this, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. I really want this." And so he said, "Okay, I'm going to get you in." So he got me in. So this is me, my first year, this is little old me, and we're doing model aircrafts. I'm having a blast. I joined the rocketry team. I was showing up to school every day. I stopped hanging out with people I shouldn't have been hanging out with because I was busy. After school, I actually had clubs to go to that I didn't have to pay for. He paid for my Civil Air Patrol enrollment, so he made sure I could join the clubs I wanted to join. He got me into a program where I went to places like MacDill Air Force Base and taught flight simulator to kids. And I said, "You know what? This doesn't change the fact that I can't afford college. This doesn't change the fact that I can't afford an education in aviation. I can't afford a pilot's license. Nothing has been changed, but I don't care." I said, "Now I know what it feels like to get my hands on aviation, to build a plane as a teenager." So I said, "You know what? Nothing's going to stop me." So after high school, I decided I just moved over to my grandparents because they moved to Mississippi at some point and all that. And I decided I was going to move to Mississippi. Now, this is the deep south. I'm talking the deep south where my grandparents live. And they had little airports all over the place. And in the deep south, you can just simply walk onto an airport and knock on hangar doors, which you can't do in places like here, right? So I went into these airports and I knocked on each and every hangar door. And I've got to tell you, it was disheartening because I was getting laughed at when I said, hey, I want to work for you with no qualifications. And every single person I talked to was a male. So it didn't feel very good. I was a skinny, blonde, 18-year-old saying, hey, I want to work for you. I want to work on aircraft. I would get laughed out of hangars. But it didn't stop me. I went to the next airport. I knocked on every door. And the very last door of one of those airports, a man opened the door. His name was Michael Schalvetter. And he said, I've met you before at the Waffle House where I worked as a waitress for all the drunk people on Saturday nights. And he said, all right, come on in. And he made me his apprentice. He was going to teach me how to work on antique aircraft, which is what he did. Come on, quickie thing. There we go. So this is me at my very first aviation job where I got paid $15 an hour, which was huge because this is, at this point, this is 2011. $15 an hour. And I'm also still working at Waffle House. I'd come in every morning. I'd ride all the way over. I'd work on aircraft like the T-28 trainer here. That's a Stenson Reliant in the back. My very first job, in case you don't know, Stenson Reliants are old, so they're fabric aircraft. My very first job, he said, the same day he pulled me into that hangar, he said, I need to remove the paint off this. I said, okay, what do I do? He hands me a bucket of water, 400 grit sandpaper, and said, it's gonna take a while. And I had to sit there for a month and sand, because it may not look that big in that picture, but they're big. He called it the Cadillac of the skies. And that's what I did. He then started taking me up with him. He had a Piper Cub. Very first time he got me in the Piper Cub, he stalled the aircraft. So if you don't know, he went straight up, the airplane went straight down. And it terrified me, but I loved it. I needed to be a part of it. I did learn something from this experience though. I was actually kind of scared of heights, which was a problem for my astronaut dreams, because the more I thought about how high they go, the less I wanted to be an astronaut. But that's okay, because I found my new passion. I wanted to work on aircraft. Now, I did forget to show you something I wanted to show you. When I said when I was just a little girl, I knew I wanted to be in aviation, I got a gift for Christmas, and I'm going to show it to you, and as you can tell, I've taken very good care of it. I didn't even open it, okay, and I was a kid. So it says a lot, kept it forever. This is an original Aviation Barbie. And I keep it on my desk at work with me because it shows little me that I did it anyways. So, once again, after doing all this, nothing had changed. I still couldn't afford college. I did try college about a semester. I went to Embry-Riddle for a semester. And then I learned two things. One, I am terrible at math, okay? And two, I was already in massive amounts of debt after one semester of college. So I said, nope, can't do that. I can't, my family, we can't afford debt. It's not something we can afford. So during this, I realized nothing had changed. I still can't afford an AMP, which is the license you need to work on aircraft. I still can't afford college. So what am I to do? Well, I only saw one option. I joined the military. That's me. I look puny. I was so tiny, they told me I had to gain weight to join. So I joined the military. And I thought, this is it. And it's really funny for anybody thinking about ever joining the military, just so you know, you go in there knowing what you want and you'll get it. Because when I went in there, I said, I want to work on helicopters, because they didn't have planes in the Army. I want to work on helicopters. And they said, oh, that's a hard job to get. What else would you be interested in doing? I said, well, if I can't work on helicopters, then I'm leaving. And they said, would you look at that? Which helicopter would you like? And I got a choice of 3. And of course, being that I was so young, I said, oh, attack helicopter, missiles, that sounds cool. And so I became an Apache helicopter mechanic. Now, one thing I did, and it's one of the greatest experiences of my life from that moment, was I went back to that class from high school. This is that grumpy old Air Force guy I told you about, and I taught a class. I taught all about my job in the Army for all the students that were once me. And it was a very memorable moment. Now, about this gentleman, this is Mr. Jeff Kalustian. We called him Mr. K because nobody could say his name. And when I started this job, I emailed him, as I have been for years, and said, hey, can I borrow some of your curriculum? And he sent it to me. He gets updates. We still talk to this day. So I know his whole family, his son and I talk. So I just want to let you know that that's who made an impact on me. And that's what really set me on this path. I'm not going to lie to you. The Army was hard. This is where being a woman makes it really hard. And it wasn't even just aviation, but it played a huge role, the fact that it was Army aviation. So first things first, I was one female for every 50 or 60 males. That was tough. For the warning that I gave at the beginning, which I think I gave, right? This is the part. It is not graphic, but a warning. I started to notice things about being female. The first incident was my first week after the company I had been assigned to returned from deployment. I'm brand new to them. I've been doing this for months, but to them, I'm brand new. Don't forget, I was previously a mechanic before I came in. I was an apprentice, but I did all this type of stuff. And I get paired up with this guy, and I'm excited to meet who I'm going to be working with. And he gets up on a helicopter. He goes, all right, we got to do this thing. I couldn't tell you what we were doing. I just remember him looking at me and going, hand me the wrench. Wait, do you even know what a wrench is? Or something along, it was a tool. And he just assumed I wouldn't know what it is. And he was very condescending. And I was very upset about it. I'll tell you what, from that day on, I was never placed to work with him again because we did not get along and I did not let it stand. I was spirited, to say the least. So he got an earful and we never worked again. But that was something that occurred time and time again. It didn't matter how long I was doing it. I heard it over and over and over again. But that happens. My worst experiences came when we did field exercises. And I got constantly talked about because why do they even let women out in the field? Where are they going to shower? Aren't they required to get a shower every 3 days? What makes them so special? Well, what if, and apologize me, what if she's on her period? What are we going to do then? We can't just stop so she can take care of that. Can't she hold it in? That's a legitimate thing. I've been asked, can't you just hold it in? And it wasn't very nice. During my time in the military, I met someone. I got married. I married a woman, which was a big problem for them. That's even worse than the sin of being a woman in the military. On my way to one of our places, we had the same job, different companies, but to save money, we would take a taxi together up to the main office where we would drop off our paperwork and return. Command Sergeant Major had a problem with this because he knew we were married. Huge problem. Not only did he not let us live together, but secondly, he wrote us up for, how do I say this without using the terms he used, but grabbing each other and stuff, which we never did. We were very professional. My first sergeant, a female, a lesbian, was harder on me than any other person. And maybe you think maybe I'm thinking it up. Maybe it's not real. Maybe I'm just thinking she's picking on me. My last day in that unit, I asked her, why are you so hard on me? And I don't think it's a valid excuse. I see where she's coming from, but I don't think it's a valid excuse. She goes, well, you're going to have it a lot harder in the rest of the military. But she was right. But do I think that was a valid excuse to be treated like crap from my first sergeant instead of being picked out of everybody? So it was an experience. But the very worst part was deployment. I was moved to a different company eventually because in the military you move around a lot. And when I deployed, it was in one company. My company was Delta Company, the big company. 121 people. It was the only female. 121 males, only female. Bonus, I got my own room. So that was cool. Unfortunately, I learned a lot. First thing I learned is I had no friends. Thought I did. I didn't. I went to a company barbecue. I was really excited to go to get out of the barracks. We were kind of stuck on base, during that time being our base, if that's what you want to call it. And I went to the barbecue, and as I'm walking up to my group of friends, I hear them talking about me. They were not talking very nice things, very degrading things about me simply because of my gender. And I just remember running away and crying, exactly what they probably thought I would have done as a woman, run away and cry. But I was really hurt. That was every friend I had, and I was in a foreign country, was talking bad about me simply because I was a woman. It got even worse. The first sign I had ever heard about sexual assault in the military was there was another girl from a different company that nobody talked to. And everybody talked bad about her, always. I said, what's so bad about her? And someone said, well, you better be careful talking to her or she might just report you for sexual assault. Well, I did get to know her because that wasn't going to stop me. Turns out she was sexually assaulted by a higher ranking soldier. And when she reported it, basically he said, she said, and nothing happened to him. And everybody found out about it. And they said she made it up. He would never do that. Well, was she drinking? Because all there was to do on the base was a bar. That was the only thing on base because we were not on a real base. It was a bar. That was it. It was the only thing on base. So of course, it had to have been her fault. That or she's making it up. So that's what happened. And I realized, oh, so one night at the MWR, is what it was called, our little bar thing, I got very drunk with my friends. I didn't really have any friends, but I sat there with the people in my company, and I was sexually assaulted that night in the barracks. To the point where I blocked out the memory for a little bit. But when I finally did remember it, it was really hard for me to realize what had happened to me. But you know what the worst part was? I didn't say a word, not a single word. I was not about to be the next girl like that one. It was already hard enough for me. I wasn't going to report that. And I never did until after I got out. I never said a word about it, not to a single soul. I kept it to myself. I moved on. First time I saw him and I realized it was him, I had a full-blown panic attack. But I couldn't tell anybody why, what was happening. I couldn't. 2 weeks after that, I was back in the States and in a completely different base than him because he was from a different base. And every time someone with a Chicago Bulls hat walked in, my heart stopped. Thought it was him. But I couldn't say a word, not a single word. Then finally, before we actually left our deployment, there was a nasty rumor going around about me. Now, one weekend, I spent the weekend off base with some actual friends that I had made in Germany. One of which I am now married to because I did get a divorce and I ended up marrying someone I met in Germany eventually. And so I was staying over there and we were all hanging out the whole weekend. I come back and apparently, keep in mind, I'm the only female. Apparently I was in McNary's room all Saturday having crazy, wild intercourse. And that was the rumor that was going around about me throughout the rest of the deployment, even though I wasn't there. That's what it's like being a woman in aviation in the Army. But I don't want to deter anybody, and here's why. Because I stuck it out, and there's a reason I stuck it out. Because if I didn't and I ran away, I would be another person dropping those statistics and showing more women that they don't belong there. And it takes more women entering into the field and persevering and breaking ground. And I wish I had reported that sexual assault back then, because I would have been another stepping stone that will create the ability for women to enter fields that are male dominated and keep pursuing those without the issues that I face. So I don't want to discourage it. I just want women to know that they can be stronger and they can be heard, and they've just got to push through it because they're creating a future for someone else. Who knows? It might be easier now than it was when I was in. So after that, I return home. I get into a brutal accident in the military. Does anybody know what an LMTV is? All right. So think of an armored pickup truck with a piece of canvas thrown over the back. A lot of people sit in the back, and then you got your driver and your sergeant in the front. Well, they put a very inexperienced driver in the front, and he rolled us. I don't want to go, to make it clear how bad it was, I'm more comfortable talking about sexual assault than the accident. It wasn't good. And the worst part was I suffered a traumatic brain injury. One that affected silly things like my sense of taste. I can't taste salt unless you pour a whole bottle in the thing. I have to add hot sauce to everything I eat to taste it really well. So it did that, but it also created dizzy spells. It created issues with blacking out. I even have issues sometimes remembering words. It's the craziest thing. It's gotten a lot better now, but at the time that barred me from being on the helicopter. And apologies. I know I just dropped a bomb on you, but I did forget something I wanted to point out before. Throughout this entire time, the chain of command had been pushing me to work in the orderly room, which is like their office, because it turns out there was another female in our company and she was working in the orderly room and she was leaving. So they needed to put someone else new in there. I just wonder why they picked the only woman to be the secretary of the company. But they got their wish, because after my accident, I couldn't work on helicopters. I had to do physical therapy. So I became the secretary of the company, and that's what I did. And I hated it. I hated seeing everybody working on helicopters and doing my dream while I worked in paperwork. Sucked. But I did a good job. I worked on it, and eventually I did get 100% disability medical retirement. So I was devastated. I was now in my late 20s with no ability to work in aviation. I thought, this is it. Everything I fought for, I fought so hard to break through those walls, to get into aviation. I fought through so many tragic things that happened to me. And yet now, regardless, I still couldn't be in aviation. So what was I to do? Let me see what I got coming up next. Make sure it's relevant. Oh yeah, okay. Let me share some more pictures, maybe. All right. So what was I gonna do? Well, I went back to school. I was living off of a VA retirement disability check, which, in case you don't know, is 125% above the poverty line. So I should be good, right? That should be a solid salary to live off of. Yeah. It pays my rent, basically, barely. Barely pays my rent. And I have a kid. There's no way I'm paying for daycare because that's highway robbery. So I decided to go back to college. I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I'm now living with the man who I married. I know I just confused you all for a second there, but I did meet a man in Germany and we did get married eventually. So I'm living with him. He's going to college. I'm going to college. We're broke. I don't know what to do. I'm kind of taking general education. I have no idea. Maybe I'll teach English. You know, I had this mentality that I don't have anymore. Something I had heard over and over again. If you can't do, teach. And so I thought, well, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna teach. I can't do anything. I'm gonna teach. So then I decided, that was my mentality at the time. We got a teacher here. Yeah. Just looking at me. And that's what I thought. I thought that was true. I thought, well, that's my only option. But I tell you what, that closed-minded thinking was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Because I got my education degree, and I also got a degree in history. I had the GI Bill, which is what the Army gives you when you get out to say, hey, go to college, because we did not give you any certifications for anything to work outside of the military. So I did. And when it was time to look for a job, I started looking around, and I went through a grueling interview process with an HR company because I was real good at being a secretary and didn't want to do it, but it was there. And I was making it through the process. And then on one day, I just decided, you know what? Let me just check one more time, see what there is. And it said, Aviation Museum, educator, aviation history education. And when I started reading about it, I learned of a program that they do that's really unique here. Has anybody ever heard about it? High school kids, for free, building an RB-12 aircraft. And I said, wow, that's what I need to do. I need to be in there. And I applied. It said I needed like 3 years of teaching experience. I needed all this. And I was like, I don't care. I wrote the most amazing, if I do say so myself, the cover letter, begging them, saying, this is my job. Just trust me. And I know I've never worked in education. I've never worked as a director of anything. I've always been on the bottom of the rung, but I know that this job was meant for me. I went through an interview process. Still didn't think I was going to get it. The questions they asked were terrifying. And then I get a call, 2 calls, one day. Well, hello, Ms. Losch. I want to let you know that our HR company would like to offer you a job paying $82,000 a year. And I was like, wow, I have kids, and well, 8 kids, unless you count my husband. And we just moved here. I need $82,000 a year. Same day, I got the call from the museum. We're gonna pay half of that. We're a nonprofit. It's what we can offer. We're flexible, which is great. And I had to make a decision. Do I take a job doing HR for double the income? Or do I take that hit and I do something that I thought I could never do again, which was aviation? Well, as you know, because I'm here, I took the job in aviation, and I will tell you, I have never been happier in my life. I have come to the conclusion that all of the trials that I went through in my life in aviation and all the downfalls I suffered were on purpose. I needed to experience them because now I have the opportunity to teach future aviators. And that's not just females, that's low income and just your standard stereotypical pilot. I'm there to guide them, to help them. And that's my goal. And this job did it for me. Now the aircraft I was talking about, this is it. This is the one they built. And this is Sam Domino. I bring it up because Sam never thought about aviation ever, not once. And she just joined this program because, you know, I want to be a girl who works on things. And so she did. She's now in basic training for the Air Force. She is this close to finishing her pilot's license, like this close, I'm telling you. And I have never been more proud of someone that I met less than a year ago in my life. I've helped a girl when I first started, a volunteer who thought, I don't really fit, you know, a mechanic. I would love to work in aviation, but I don't really fit that. Her name's Luna. And I took her around to colleges. I drug her behind me. I showed her different things. I had her take an aptitude test to help find out what she's good at. I did everything I could. Well, I'd like to tell you she does go to college now. She's working in aviation maintenance. She's the president of her aviation maintenance club. And we talk every 2 weeks on the dot. She never forgets to call me because I forget to call everybody. And she thanked me for helping her see that she could be in aviation, even though she didn't fit the mold. So when I say this job has been the most rewarding thing, I know that I might just be one woman in aviation, but I see the future that we have. And I tell my story because I think it's important to hear that it is not easy being a woman in aviation. It's not. It's really hard. Some days you just don't want to be there. It's so hard. But it's worth it because of people like Sam Domino, who I know is not going to take a single word from anybody discriminating against her. And I would like to say that we've been improving. A lot of people, when I bring up the argument of how many women are in aviation, they're like, oh, well, it's getting a lot better. Let me show you the statistics from the last 20 years. Oh, wait, sorry, this is my summer camp. It's super cool, just a small plug, shameless. This is my summer camp. It is barrier-free. That means that if your kid wanted to get in, I don't care if they can afford it. I will get them in. I have no cares. You come up to me and say, I am flat broke. I have no money at all, but my kid wants to do this. They're coming in. And I don't just say that, I mean it. We've had 3 kids this year that were 100% scholarships because they couldn't afford it, but they wanted it. Because I'm not denying anybody into aviation like I was. Sure, you can send me your W-2 so I can see that you make technically enough to not qualify, but I don't care because I know the reality. I know what it's like on enough income with 3 kids and 4 kids and even 2 kids paying for 2 daycares. God forbid. There are parents in here. You paid for daycare. It's atrocious. So this is a picture from the summer camp where these kids are standing in front of the prime aircraft. They had a blast. I just wanted to plug that in shamelessly. So these are the statistics I was telling you about. What I find interesting and why I point out is how high, and yes, 15% is high, females as student pilots. 50% of all student pilots are female in 2005. It goes down by 2022, but still, this is pretty high. So tell me why, even including recreational pilots only, this number, only 5%, 5 years later, 6%, 5 years later, 6%, 5 years later, 6%, 5 years later, well, 2 years later, now today, 7%. Why are we not increasing women in aviation? Because they're still facing blatant discrimination. And it's not just the military. It's airlines. One flight attendant, this is a secondhand story. One flight attendant who worked for a major airline was told she had to wear heels on the aircraft. You know, show off her feminine bod. I don't know why it was a requirement. Required to wear heels. Turbulence hit, she breaks her ankle. Can't work. They fire her. Another woman, this is very recent. This is 2020 recent. I interviewed a female pilot who's asked me not to disclose her name or the company she currently works for, who it happened with. Her husband, also a pilot, doing it the same amount of time for a major airline. And when I say major, I mean major. She goes to catch the jump seat, which is the seat in the cockpit, full outfit on. She's ready to go. And the guy at the ticket counter says, "I'm sorry, we don't let flight attendants take the jump seat." She said, "I'm a pilot." And like he didn't hear her, repeated, "Ma'am, we don't let flight attendants take the jump seat." She showed him her pilot's ID and he said, "Ma'am, I'm really busy. I have a lot of people waiting. If you could move to the side." And she didn't get on that plane until her husband had to come out of the plane as a man and say, "Why are you not letting my wife on the thing?" "Well, we don't let flight attendants." "She's a pilot. She told you she was a pilot." "Oh, yes. Okay, of course, sir." Got her on the plane. So it is still recent. And she talked about her experience, which is important. We need to be able to see that and eliminate it. But still, we're not improving as much as we should be. So I just need to show that. And this is where I come in. Mechanic percentages, 2 and 3% over the last 22 years. My math right? No, it's not, is it? It's fine. I said I wasn't good at math, right? So I just wanted to share these statistics to show you. So I'm going to wrap up and open for questions in a minute, but I want to thank all of you for hearing my story. It's a troubling one at first, but say I have found my purpose, and aviation was always it for me. It just took a lot to get here. And even though I'm not working on planes or flying them or becoming an astronaut, because, you know, that's high, even because I'm not doing any of that, doesn't matter. I'm still in aviation. I am helping people facing those walls I faced and showing them that they're hills and showing them how to get across those hills without having to do things like I did. So thank you for hearing my story and coming out tonight. And yeah, there we go. Oh, but I'm really failing at this. In aviation, 80% of flight attendants are women. Just want to point that out. It's still a high number. Yeah, we're just going to cut because I already ended. So questions? Anybody have any questions? Someone's got to make one up if you don't already have one. Because I'm going to make one up. There we go.
What was the name of the camp that you mentioned?
It's the Aviation Museums of New Hampshire's Flights of Discovery. I do have a flyer I can hand you afterwards.
Sure, thank you.
Any other question? There we go.
What is that airplane on the Aviation Museum
You
logo?
would. You would. I really hope my boss isn't watching this. Okay, we have 3 volunteers here. Any of you know?
It looks like one of the first planes that they landed.
One of the Curtis's, maybe?
In New Hampshire, but I can't remember what kind it is.
One of the first planes that landed in New Hampshire. That's why, because the one at the airport's different. Okay, there we go. So hypothetically, off the top of my guessing head with her input, it's Carol, Jeff. That might possibly be one of the first aircrafts to land in New Hampshire. No, it's fine, I guess. Any other questions? Of course.
How do they, you see the movies Top Gun, how do they quantify or qualify those pilots to be the best of the best?
Brutally, from what I've been told. I can only talk from hearing secondhand stories here and there about helicopter pilots going into the military. But I know at one point they literally drowned them to get them to get out of a helicopter. They go through a lot of training. And in the military specifically, they go through a lot of training. As far as commercial aviation, it's a bit different. If you know, it's more relaxed, but military training, not only are you getting a fake helicopter dumped into a pool and trying to get out, from my understanding, but you're also going through things like SEER training, where you're getting put in a trunk and have to figure out which direction you're going, and then getting threatened to find out if you'll give out intel. So they go through some rigorous training that I don't know the full extent of, because I was just a mechanic.
I Google screenshot that photo and I don't know if it's the same plane. I don't know.
Actually, that looks like it
But
could be.
it says Boeing Screamin' five planes, PT-17.
Could be. I could not tell you. I wish I could with full
I
certainty.
just don't know if it's the same.
No, it's.
Fair enough.
I tried.
Any other questions? Did I answer your question fully? I hope so. I did the best I could.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. As far as helicopter mechanic goes, it's months of a classroom and learning about what a Jesus nut is. In case you don't know, someone's laughing, you know. It's learning that I never actually want to be in a helicopter, just fix them. It's the one plate or one bolt that holds the propellers on. Yeah, learn that lesson. But mostly training to work on helicopters in the military is just sitting in a classroom and trying really hard not to fall asleep.
I gotta know, the Apache that you worked on, there's the Black Hawk too.
That's all right.
So obviously they're two separate.
Yes.
What is the difference? Because those are obviously the
A lot.
assault helicopters, right?
Well, one, the Apache's just better, obviously. It's an attack helicopter. So
Right.
its main focus is reconnaissance and attack. It's got missiles, the Hellfire missiles. It's got 30 mic rounds, 30 millimeter rounds, which by the way are massive. And what I mean by that is the shells they discard, we use the shot glasses. So they're large. The other thing is it's a two-seater helicopter. So here's why I've never been on a helicopter until this year, not just the Jesus nut, because trust me, that was a factor. But the other thing is that there's only two seats in an Apache. It's the pilot and the co-pilot gunner. The other thing is not only do they have weapons, they can aim them with their eyes, which is super cool, with their head. And then the Black Hawk, it transports people and stuff. That's what it does.
Black Hawk isn't an attack?
They use them for like the medical transports, like the medevacs, in the military sense. They transport soldiers, you know, that's what they do. They're all right.
But they're necessary.
They're necessary. Yes, thank you, Carol. They're very necessary. If you can't tell, there's only the slightest bit of beef between the two. It's fine. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, I will give it back to the awesome.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Come on over.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Thank you. And we're gonna start in the planetarium at 8 o'clock. We'll open up the doors and you can go down there. Wallace and I are gonna go check the skies while you guys are in there to see if we can do the observatory. There are two New Hampshire astronauts